Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far and wide our viewers are tuning in. Now, imagine this. Rimuru, the adaptive, suddenly enters the Hunter x Hunter universe. What happens next? Let's find out. Rimuru doesn't arrive with a shockwave or a clash of gods. There's no sky splitting open, no dramatic prophecy announcing his presence. Instead, he materializes quietly in a dense, unfamiliar wilderness where the air itself feels heavy, tense, almost watchful. This world doesn't scream danger through monsters or magic circles. It whispers it through intent. Instantly, Rimuru senses it. Not mana, not spirit particles, something sharper, something alive. An invisible pressure that reacts to thought, emotion, and desire. Nen. From the very first moment, Rimuru realizes this universe is different. Power here isn't simply accumulated, it's cultivated through discipline, identity, and self-awareness. Even the weakest creatures carry a faint trace of intent, while stronger beings unconsciously leak aura like heat from a flame. To Rimuru's analytical mind, this isn't just a new energy system, it's a psychological one. Nen isn't asking how strong you are, it's asking who you are. As Rimuru moves, the forest reacts. Animals flee long before he reaches them, not because they sense overwhelming force, but because his presence feels undefined. Hunters are trained to read aura types, enhancement, transmutation, conjuration. But Rimuru's existence doesn't settle into any category. His aura doesn't flare. It doesn't harden. It flows, reshapes, withdraws, as if it's constantly listening. For the first time since entering a new world, Rimuru doesn't immediately dominate the environment. He studies it. Somewhere far away, a seasoned Nen user pauses mid-step. The sensation is subtle but unmistakable, like noticing a silence where sound should exist. This isn't a hostile aura, yet it feels wrong, unnatural, as if something has entered the ecosystem without belonging to it. That single disturbance sends ripples outward, unnoticed by civilians, but impossible to ignore for those who've survived long enough to trust their instincts. Rimuru, meanwhile, begins experimenting. He suppresses his own power, mimicking the restraint Nen users impose on themselves. The result is unexpected. The surrounding pressure responds. The world acknowledges the restraint not as weakness, but as intent. That's when it clicks. Nen isn't something you take. It's something the world allows you to use, as long as you understand the rules. And for the first time, Rimuru understands that brute adaptation won't be enough here. To truly exist in this world, he'll need to define himself within it, and as unseen eyes begin to turn toward the anomaly in the forest, that realization becomes far more dangerous than any enemy he's faced so far. Rimuru slows his movement even further, almost deliberately shrinking his presence, and the effect is immediate. The oppressive pressure in the air doesn't vanish, but it settles, like a beast deciding not to pounce just yet. This world rewards control. That realization alone makes Hunter x Hunter infinitely more dangerous than most realms Rimuru has encountered. Here, hesitation can be strength, and confidence without understanding can get even the powerful killed. Nen is not impressed by raw potential. It demands clarity. As he observes more closely, Rimuru begins to notice something unsettling. The aura signatures scattered across the land aren't uniform. Some are sharp and focused, others erratic and wild, but all of them are deeply personal. Nen reflects trauma, ambition, obsession, its power carved by experience. That's when an unfamiliar thought crosses Rimuru's mind. In this world, power isn't just a weapon. It's a confession. Every Nen user broadcasts pieces of who they are, whether they want to or not. Great Sage begins its analysis, but even it encounters resistance. Nen refuses to be neatly quantified. Vows, conditions, self-imposed limits. These concepts don't function like equations. They function like promises, and breaking them carries consequences far beyond physical backlash. Rimuru understands this immediately. Nen punishes shortcuts. It remembers intent. Copying it blindly would be like wearing someone else's skin and expecting it to fit. The forest ahead opens into a clearing, and for a brief moment Rimuru feels it again. That subtle awareness, like someone testing the air for vibrations. He isn't being watched directly, not yet, but he is being noticed. Somewhere nearby, a hunter is evaluating whether this presence is prey, threat, or something that doesn't belong in the food chain at all. Rimuru doesn't react aggressively. Instead, he does something few in this world would expect from a being of his caliber. He waits. That decision alone alters the future. In Hunter x Hunter, those who wait tend to survive longer, because patience here is not passive. It's strategic. Rimuru lowers his aura even further, letting it ripple gently rather than dominate. And the response is immediate. The pressure eases. The world, in its own way, acknowledges him. Not as a ruler, not as an invader, but as a participant. And yet this fragile balance cannot last. Nen thrives on conflict, on friction between wills. The longer Rimuru exists without defining his intent, the more unstable his presence becomes. Hunters, creatures, even the land itself will eventually demand an answer to a simple question. What does this being want? As Rimuru begins to understand that question, he also realizes something far more dangerous. In this world, intent shapes reality. And once his intent becomes clear, there will be no hiding from the consequences. Rimuru begins to test that idea carefully, not through force, but through intention. He focuses on a single thought, curiosity, nothing more, and allows it to surface without restraint. The reaction is subtle, yet profound. The ambient aura around him shifts, responding not to his power, but to the clarity of his mindset. Nen users train for years to reach this level of self-awareness, yet Rimuru touches it instinctively. That alone makes him dangerous in a way few would immediately recognize. From a distance, a hunter finally steps into view, not charging, not hiding, just observing. The aura surrounding them is tight, disciplined, honed through countless life or death decisions. Their presence confirms Rimuru's growing suspicion. This world polices itself through those who survive it. Hunters are not heroes or villains. They are filters, separating those who can exist in this system from those who cannot. And right now, Rimuru is being evaluated. The hunter feels it too. Rimuru's aura is calm, almost gentle, but it refuses to settle into a shape. It doesn't threaten, yet it doesn't submit. For someone trained to read Nen, that ambiguity is unsettling. This isn't an enhancer asserting dominance or a manipulator probing for control. It's something fluid, adaptive, as if the aura itself is waiting to decide what it wants to be. Instinctively, the hunter tightens their ten, bracing for the unknown. Rimuru acknowledges them with a slight shift in posture, a nonverbal signal of awareness without hostility. In another world, this moment would spiral into conflict. Here, it becomes a standoff built on mutual restraint. Nen rewards those who act with purpose, but it also punishes those who misjudge intent. Both sides understand that striking first could be catastrophic. As seconds stretch, Rimuru gains another insight. Nen isn't merely projected outward, it loops inward. The hunter's control isn't just defensive, it's introspective. Their power exists because they understand their limits and because they've accepted them. That acceptance sharpens their resolve. Rimuru, for the first time since arriving, encounters a system that does not crumble when analyzed. It resists, adapts, pushes back. The forest grows unnaturally still. Even the insects seem to pause, as if the world itself is holding its breath. This is Nen at its most fundamental level. Two wills pressing against each other without a single blow exchanged. Rimuru recognizes the danger now. If he reveals too much, he becomes a threat. If he reveals too little, he becomes an anomaly that must be eliminated. So he chooses balance. Rimuru allows a fraction of his identity to surface, not as power, but as intent, peace, not dominance, not conquest, just coexistence. The aura responds accordingly, smoothing its edges, becoming readable without becoming weak. The hunter feels it instantly, and their stance relaxes by a fraction. Not trust, not acceptance, but acknowledgement. Yet this moment marks a point of no return. Somewhere beyond this forest, other hunters will feel the echo. An unfamiliar presence that understands Nen without being born into it. A being whose intent can shape the aura around him as naturally as breathing. Rimuru may not realize it yet, but by choosing to engage with Nen on its own terms, he has announced himself to a world that never ignores anomalies for long. The hunter eventually withdraws, not retreating in fear, but stepping back with deliberate caution, as if committing Rimuru's presence to memory rather than dismissing it as a fleeting threat. That alone tells Rimuru everything he needs to know. In this world, survival isn't about winning encounters. It's about being remembered for the right reasons. And now, somewhere within the informal network of hunters, a quiet report will begin to circulate, not of a monster, not of an enemy, but of something undefined. Rimuru remains still long after the aura fades from the clearing. He understands now that movement here has consequences beyond distance. Every decision leaves an imprint, and Nen carries those imprints far beyond the immediate moment. The hunter-ex-hunter world doesn't react instantly. It observes, catalogs, waits. That patience makes it lethal. Rimuru's adaptive nature recognizes this not as a challenge to overpower, but as a system to respect. As he continues forward, the land itself feels different. The oppressive tension he sensed earlier no longer presses against him. Instead, it flows alongside him, like a current testing whether he can swim without disrupting the water. Rimuru experiments again, not with suppression this time, but with expression. He allows a controlled pulse of aura to ripple outward, shaped by restraint rather than force. The response is immediate. The surrounding Nen doesn't recoil. It aligns. That alignment sends a message. Somewhere in a distant city, a veteran Nen user stirs from rest, frowning without understanding why. Far above, in places where information is traded like currency, whispers begin forming around a single question. What kind of being can interact with Nen without bending it to ego or violence? Rimuru has done something unprecedented. He hasn't challenged the system. He's harmonized with it. Yet harmony in this world invites scrutiny. The more balanced Rimuru becomes, the more visible he is to those who seek imbalance. Fighters hungry for challenge, manipulators eager to test control, and entities who view Nen not as discipline, but as domination. Rimuru senses this inevitability. Peace here is not permanent. It is negotiated daily, enforced by awareness and choice. By the time Rimuru reaches the edge of the forest, he no longer feels like an outsider. He feels like a variable, one the world hasn't accounted for yet. And variables are dangerous, not because they destroy systems, but because they force those systems to evolve. Nen thrives on individuality, on limitation, on desire. Rimuru embodies something else entirely. Growth without obsession, power without fixation. As the horizon opens before him, Rimuru understands the truth of this universe. Strength here isn't measured by who stands tallest after the battle. It's measured by who defines themselves so completely that the world has no choice but to respond. And now, whether he intends it or not, the hunter-ex-hunter universe has begun to respond to Rimuru Tempest. Rimuru doesn't seek out civilization immediately, and that decision alone shapes how the hunter world begins to perceive him. In a universe where power-hungry anomalies usually announce themselves through destruction, Rimuru's restraint becomes suspicious. Hunters are trained to investigate the unexplained, and reports of an undefined aura moving through multiple regions without leaving casualties spreads faster than Rimuru expects. This isn't the kind of mystery the association ignores. It's the kind that draws in veterans. The first true encounter doesn't happen in a city or a battlefield. It happens on a narrow mountain path where visibility is limited and escape routes are few. Rimuru senses the shift before he sees them. Multiple aura signatures, layered, coordinated, each one disciplined in its own way. These are not rookies. These are hunters who understand that monsters don't always look monstrous. From their perspective, Rimuru is a paradox. His physical form registers as non-human, yet his aura carries none of the hostility usually associated with magical beasts. At the same time, it lacks the emotional turbulence common in human Nen users. This absence is unsettling. One hunter quietly reinforces their N, expanding awareness just enough to confirm that Rimuru is alone. No ambush, no hidden backup, just the anomaly itself standing calmly in the path as if this confrontation was inevitable. Rimuru initiates the interaction not with words, but with intent. He slows his aura, compressing it inward, a gesture that in Nen language signals restraint rather than submission. The hunters feel it immediately. It's a subtle acknowledgement of their presence, one that says he recognizes the danger they represent. That single act prevents immediate escalation. Nen responds to understanding, and for a brief moment, both sides are reading each other instead of attacking. One hunter steps forward, eyes sharp, posture relaxed but ready. They've faced Chimera Ant officers, rogue enhancers, and creatures that exist solely to kill. Yet this feels different. Rimuru doesn't radiate predatory focus or desperation. He radiates awareness, as if he's observing not just their auras, but the decisions behind them. The realization sends a ripple of unease through the group. This is the moment the labels begin to blur. Monster or person, threat or ally. Hunters are trained to classify quickly, but Rimuru resists classification. He doesn't challenge their authority, nor does he avoid it. He stands in the space between, forcing them to confront the uncomfortable possibility that power can exist without ambition. Somewhere deep within the Hunter Association's hierarchy, this encounter will later be dissected frame by frame, not because of violence, but because of its absence. The hunters eventually allow Rimuru to pass, not out of mercy, but out of uncertainty. And in the Hunter x Hunter world, uncertainty is often more dangerous than fear. Rimuru moves past the initial encounter with careful observation, noting every detail about these hunters, the way their aura fluctuates under stress, how their eyes shift subtly to anticipate movement, the faint ripple of intention that trails each thought. Even without speaking, Rimuru begins piecing together their abilities, their type of Nen, and the potential for both cooperation and conflict. Unlike previous worlds where power was often raw and predictable, here it is intimately tied to personality, and personality can be unpredictable. Each hunter he passes is a living equation, and Rimuru, ever the analyst, cannot help but calculate probabilities. The tension doesn't dissipate entirely. Nen has a memory, subtle but persistent. As Rimuru travels, whispers of his presence ripple through the surrounding forests and villages. Hunters, rogue Nen users, and even creatures accustomed to preying on humans sense something unfamiliar, something that bends the rules without breaking them. It's not hostility, but it is attention. And in Hunter x Hunter, attention can quickly become action. Rumors spread faster than a physical trail could ever allow, and the idea of a being who manipulates aura without aggressive intent begins to unsettle even the most seasoned professionals. Rimuru soon encounters his first non-human threat in this world, a pack of Nen-empowered predators patrolling the borderlands between wilderness and settled territory. Their aura is raw, unrefined, instinctive, designed purely for hunting and killing. Unlike ordinary beasts, these creatures can read fluctuations in intent, detecting hesitation, fear, and aggression alike. Rimuru observes them from a distance, analyzing the flow of their aura as a fluid network of decisions. It's a game of survival, and Rimuru is learning a rule fundamental to this universe. Here, power is inseparable from perception. One misstep, one misread of intent, and even the strong can fall. Rather than engage immediately, Rimuru experiments. Using his unique absorption ability in combination with Nen perception, he blends his aura subtly into the surrounding environment, masking his intent while simultaneously gauging the creature's responses. He notes that unlike in other universes, brute force would not suffice. Nen requires more than strength. It requires strategy, timing, and psychological precision. With every movement, Rimuru tests the boundaries, learning how a non-sentient yet Nen-empowered being reacts to an unknown factor in its ecosystem. Each encounter is data, each observation a layer added to his understanding of this complex living system. While Rimuru navigates these threats, the hunters from earlier continue tracking him from a distance, unseen but calculating. They are wary of confrontation, yet equally wary of letting the anomaly disappear unmonitored. Nen users in this universe do not act recklessly, but they act decisively when unknown variables could destabilize the balance. Rimuru senses their eyes, their focus, their aura adjustments, even without seeing them directly. The realization is stark. In this world, being unopposed is not freedom. It is temporary invisibility. Every move carries the weight of scrutiny, and every hesitation can be fatal. This delicate dance between Rimuru and the hunters, between Rimuru and the Nen-enhanced predators, illustrates the unique tension of hunter x hunter. Threats are evaluated constantly, decisions carry consequence, and understanding intent can mean the difference between life and death. Rimuru's adaptability allows him to navigate these waters fluidly, yet he knows that this is only the beginning. Each interaction, each observation is shaping both his strategy and his reputation. And somewhere beyond the immediate forests and mountains, whispers of the slime that reads Nen begin to reach ears trained to discern anomalies. The world is starting to take notice, and the first ripples of consequences are already forming. The more Rimuru moves through this unfamiliar landscape, the more he realizes how interconnected everything is in the Hunter x Hunter universe. Unlike his previous experiences, where strength often meant the ability to overwhelm, here power exists within a network of cause and effect. Every step he takes, every subtle change in his aura, sends vibrations through the surrounding Nen currents. Even the trees, rocks, and rivers respond, not because they are alive in the usual sense, but because Nen infuses the environment with a sort of consciousness, a feedback loop that rewards understanding and punishes miscalculation. Rimuru senses this immediately, noting that even the smallest action here can have far-reaching consequences, and his every movement must now account for more than just survival. It must account for perception, anticipation, and influence. Hunters, aware of the anomaly's trajectory, begin converging from multiple regions, using both tracking and predictive Nen techniques to narrow down Rimuru's path. Each group carries a unique style of aura manipulation. One relies on stealth and detection, another on raw confrontation, and yet another on subtle mental probing. They don't coordinate formally, but their cumulative awareness forms a network capable of triangulating Rimuru's presence with astonishing efficiency. Rimuru, however, moves with the patience of a strategist. He adjusts his aura like a chameleon, allowing him to remain detectable only in the patterns he wants, creating confusion without aggression. The hunters sense this immediately, realizing that they are observing not just a creature, but a mind that thinks in ways unfamiliar even to the most seasoned Nen practitioners. At the same time, Rimuru encounters creatures that would normally inspire immediate fear. Nen-enhanced predators capable of reading thought patterns, tracking intent, and anticipating movement before it happens. These encounters are not combative initially. Rimuru studies their behavior, analyzing the flow of their aura, their decision-making tendencies, and their hierarchies. His unique ability to absorb and process information in real time allows him to experiment with strategies other beings could not conceive. He adapts, blends, and responds with a fluidity that challenges the very principles these creatures rely upon for survival. By understanding intent and acting in subtle counterpoints, Rimuru demonstrates that power here is as much about comprehension and restraint as it is about strength. Hunters watching from afar begin to sense this dynamic, their opinions and assessments diverging in subtle but significant ways. Some consider Rimuru a potential threat to be neutralized preemptively, while others recognize his unprecedented adaptation as something that could provide insight into Nen itself. Their internal debate reflects a core principle of this universe. Survival is not just about defeating enemies, it is about understanding them. Rimuru, consciously or not, forces the hunters to confront a reality that they rarely face, an entity whose intent cannot be measured by aggression, ego, or ambition, yet whose presence has the potential to reshape the balance of power simply through observation and adaptability. Rimuru's analysis does not stop with individual interactions. He begins noticing patterns across the ecosystem, connecting the movements of hunters, creatures, and even ambient aura fluctuations as threads in a complex web. It becomes clear that this world is governed as much by psychological principles as it is by raw strength. The strongest beings here are those who understand themselves and their surroundings at a level few others can, manipulating not just energy, but perception, expectation, and instinct. For the first time, Rimuru experiences a power system that is less about raw force and more about intelligence, strategy, and the capacity to influence outcomes without direct confrontation. This realization changes everything. He is no longer just a foreign entity in a new world. He is a variable that challenges the assumptions and instincts of everyone around him. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, Rimuru pauses on a ridge overlooking a small settlement. He senses multiple layers of aura converging from the town below. Hunters and civilians alike have begun to notice anomalies in their environment, patterns that cannot be explained by ordinary events. The balance of observation, restraint, and subtle influence continues to shape his path. Rimuru understands that his next steps will inevitably lead to direct contact. The world has taken note of him, and while he has avoided confrontation so far, the first meaningful meeting between Rimuru and a hunter, or perhaps a more dangerous entity, is fast approaching. The tension in the air thickens, the landscape itself seems to lean forward, and the first true test of Rimuru's adaptation in this universe is about to begin. The night begins to settle over the forest, but Rimuru remains alert, his senses extending far beyond the limits of ordinary perception. Nen reacts differently under the cover of darkness. Subtle fluctuations in intent become more pronounced, while careless movements are amplified. Rimuru notes the difference immediately. The hunters pursuing him are no longer relying solely on sight. They are reading the world in layers of aura, detecting disturbances in the natural order, and adjusting their approach accordingly. Even in shadow, he cannot simply hide. He must adapt, not only to survive, but to maintain the delicate balance that has kept him undetected thus far. As he moves through the tree line, Rimuru notices a faint but distinct change in the local Nen currents. A predator, one of the more intelligent Nen-enhanced beasts, is trailing him, analyzing his behavior for weaknesses. Its approach is precise, measured, testing his response without revealing its full capabilities. Rimuru adjusts, allowing a controlled ripple of aura to mislead the creature, subtly projecting decoy intent while masking his own. The predator reacts instinctively, anticipating one path that Rimuru never intended to take. The dance of action and reaction demonstrates exactly how complex Nen truly is. It is not merely about raw energy, but the interaction between mind, body, and perception. Even creatures shaped by survival instinct must adapt when faced with a being like Rimuru. Meanwhile, the hunters are closing the net. Multiple parties have started converging on his location, each interpreting the subtle shifts in aura differently. Some see him as a threat requiring elimination, others as an anomaly worth studying. The tension among them mirrors the tension Rimuru experiences. In Hunter x Hunter, hesitation is dangerous, but overconfidence is fatal. Each hunter calculates their approach based on incomplete information, while Rimuru calculates the environment itself as a weapon and a shield. The forest becomes both a stage and a battleground where combat may not even be physical. Strategy, perception, and intent dominate over brute force. Rimuru senses the inevitability of direct contact. It isn't a question of if, but when. The aura of the hunters converges like currents in a river, forming channels that reveal both their intentions and their limitations. Rimuru notes that some are manipulators, able to subtly influence thoughts and emotions. Others are enhancers, capable of overwhelming force if provoked. Understanding this, he begins shaping his aura with unprecedented subtlety, blending enhancement, emission, and manipulation-like qualities into a fluid expression that resists categorization. He is creating a new form of Nen in real time, not through study alone, but through instinct, adaptation, and the direct feedback of those observing him. This is unprecedented in the history of the Hunter x Hunter world, and if anyone were watching, they would understand immediately that they were encountering something beyond their comprehension. Eventually, the confrontation becomes unavoidable. A lone hunter steps forward, separated slightly from the converging groups, moving with cautious precision. The aura emanating from this individual is disciplined, tightly controlled, radiating the kind of confidence born from countless life and death encounters. Rimuru does not react with hostility. Instead, he mirrors restraint with restraint, projecting an aura that signals awareness and intent without aggression. The hunter senses this, but instinctively prepares for defense. The tension is almost tangible, a silent negotiation between two entirely different forms of understanding. Neither side strikes, yet both are fully aware that the slightest misstep could spark a deadly exchange. This standoff exemplifies the unique challenge Rimuru faces in the Hunter x Hunter universe. Unlike worlds where overwhelming power is sufficient to dominate, here he must negotiate survival, influence, and perception simultaneously. His presence is a puzzle, a variable that cannot be easily measured or predicted. The hunter's aura, disciplined and purposeful, presses against his, yet Rimuru's adaptive nature allows him to absorb, analyze, and respond in real time. Even as the forest grows quiet and shadows deepen, the undercurrent of conflict and observation continues, setting the stage for the first true test of Rimuru's interaction with the hunters and the world of Nen itself. The encounter is only the beginning, and the consequences of this first contact are poised to ripple far beyond the immediate clearing, shaping alliances, rivalries, and the perception of the Slime King across the Hunter x Hunter universe. Rimuru retreats to a quiet ridge overlooking the dense forest below, taking the time to reflect on everything he has encountered so far. The hunters, the Nen-enhanced predators, the subtle interactions of intent. All of it has revealed a truth that he has never faced in any other world. Nen is more than a power system. It is a language, a living framework, a mirror of the self projected into reality. For the first time, Rimuru cannot simply absorb, mimic, or adapt in isolation. He must understand. He must participate. Great Sage begins running simulations, cross-referencing Nen classifications with Rimuru's existing abilities. But even the AI-like guidance struggles to account for the fluidity and instinctive nuances of this system. Nen reacts not only to the physical body, but to mind, emotion, and intent. And Rimuru realizes that his typical methods of analysis will not be enough. Rimuru begins experimenting cautiously. He isolates a single principle, 10, the most basic form of aura control, the defensive shell that shields life force. On the surface, it is simple, yet it is intimately tied to discipline and self-perception. Rimuru can feel his own energy flowing outward, flexible and unbound. But here he is forced to compress, regulate, and stabilize it in a way that Nen demands. He notes the immediate effect. The world responds. Trees stop swaying as unnaturally, animals approach cautiously, and even the residual presence of distant hunters seems less tense. He realizes for the first time that Nen does not simply exist within him. It exists around him as a relationship between his intent and the world's perception of that intent. Great Sage suggests integrating Ren and Zetsu into the practice, but Rimuru chooses a subtler approach. Instead of overwhelming output, he experiments with restraint and feedback loops, allowing his aura to pulse lightly and retreat like a tide testing the shore. The effect is profound. Even untrained Nen users begin to notice shifts in the ambient energy, though they cannot yet identify the source. Nen responds to him as if curious, as if aware that it is being understood not as a weapon, but as a phenomenon to be explored. Rimuru is learning the rules of the system, but at the same time, Nen is learning him. The boundaries of what the world expects from an aura are beginning to stretch subtly around his presence. After hours of observation, Rimuru tries to push further. He focuses on a single concept: enhancement, the simplest yet most versatile Nen category. Normally, this would involve hardening one's body and strengthening attacks, but Rimuru's form complicates everything. There is no fixed skeleton, no fixed musculature, nothing that traditional enhancement techniques could latch onto. Instead, he experiments with self-modification on a molecular level, reinforcing the cohesion of his slime body in sync with his intent. The forest responds immediately. Rocks that should have been too heavy to move with Nen manipulation shift slightly. Insects pause mid-flight, and the faintest pulse of energy travels outward like a ripple. Great Sage observes this with fascination. Rimuru's enhancement does not follow conventional rules. It is adaptive, intuitive, and anticipatory. Curiosity drives him further. He tries a minimal form of emission, projecting aura outward without direct manipulation, letting it interact with objects at a distance. Where a typical Nen user would require precise control and conditions, Rimuru allows his intent to guide the flow organically. The world responds with an almost conscious reaction. Leaves flutter as if acknowledging the pulse. The distant predators hesitate, and the hunter's sensory projections detect fluctuations they cannot classify. In essence, Rimuru is creating a feedback loop. His aura influences the world responds, and the response informs his next action. Nen is no longer a system to be learned. It is a conversation. Even more astonishing occurs when Rimuru experiments with Gaio and In. He focuses his observation on a single distant target, a wild Nen-empowered creature, and attempts to detect the hidden currents of aura beneath its instinctive actions. For the first time, Rimuru experiences Nen's psychological layer. The creature's aura is not just energy. It is thought, instinct, and fear intertwined. He can sense hesitation, aggression, and curiosity simultaneously. By matching his aura subtly to these patterns, Rimuru can anticipate the creature's movements without striking, influencing its behavior without confrontation. This isn't just adaptation. This is coevolution. Nen adjusts itself to accommodate his presence, and he adjusts himself in response. Rimuru's experimentation continues as night falls, with Zetsu suppressing residual energy leaks and Great Sage calculating potential consequences of overextension. He moves beyond observation into small-scale manipulation, testing manipulation and conjuration by projecting intangible forms of himself into the environment. Unlike traditional conjuration, Rimuru's projections are flexible, shape-shifting in response to environmental cues and the intent of observers. Hunters in the distance notice anomalies in the flow of aura, a presence that shifts unpredictably yet purposefully. For the first time, Rimuru begins to understand the true challenge of this universe. To wield Nen effectively, one must merge intellect, instinct, and identity into every action. The more Rimuru practices, the more Nen reacts in return. Subtle phenomena begin occurring in the forest around him. Branches that might have obstructed movement bend naturally. Shadows shift in ways that reflect his intent, and the very ground seems to acknowledge his passage. It is not magic and it is not raw force, it is dialogue. Nen is teaching him just as he is learning it, and for the first time Rimuru feels the thrill of being genuinely challenged by a system that cannot be brute forced. At this moment, he understands that his greatest weapon in Hunter x Hunter may not be the ability to absorb, replicate, or dominate, but the capacity to communicate with the very fabric of Nen itself. Rimuru's experiments are not without danger. Pushing beyond simple enhancement and observation risks attracting attention from hunters or more dangerous entities. Yet even as he senses the approach of potential observers, he recognizes that restraint and understanding are as much weapons as raw strength. Each pulse of aura, each test of intent, is both a declaration and a question. He asks the world what it is, and it answers with movement, fluctuation, and reaction. The feedback is instantaneous, and Rimuru's mind races to interpret, adapt, and respond in real time. As dawn begins to break, Rimuru pauses, observing the landscape transformed subtly by his experiments. Nen has adjusted, bending itself around his presence without breaking its own rules. This is the first true success, and he feels a sense of cautious triumph. Yet he knows this is only the beginning. There are hunters to meet, challenges that will push his understanding further, and consequences that cannot yet be predicted. Nen is no longer a tool, it is a living system, a teacher, and a puzzle that responds to curiosity, discipline, and intent. Rimuru has taken the first steps into mastering it, but the deeper lessons are yet to come, and the forest, the hunters, and the world itself are waiting to test him in ways he has never imagined. Rimuru wakes fully aware that mastering Nen in this world requires more than mimicry or adaptation. It demands integration. Great Sage presents a layered analysis of his previous experiments, highlighting patterns of feedback between his aura and the environment. Rimuru reviews it carefully, noting how subtle shifts in his intents produced measurable changes in both physical phenomena and the behavior of nearby Nen-enhanced creatures. The forest itself seems to acknowledge these shifts, branches bending slightly in response to aura currents, wildlife pausing mid-motion as though sensing the experiment unfolding. This is no longer just observation. It is communication, a silent dialogue with the laws of the Hunter x Hunter universe, and Rimuru is beginning to realize that he is rewriting the parameters of interaction without violating the rules themselves. Encouraged by this, Rimuru decides to tackle more advanced forms of Nen, beginning with Hatsu. He focuses on expressing his innate adaptive abilities through this framework, testing whether his shape-shifting and absorption can be amplified and refined by applying conditions and restrictions. Traditional Nen teaches that limitations, when consciously imposed, can magnify potential beyond natural capability. Rimuru understands instinctively how to frame these conditions, but he struggles with a psychological component. Hatsu is not just ability, it is will, desire, and self-definition condensed into power. He experiments carefully, projecting small forms of himself to interact with the terrain, adjusting each pulse of aura with a precise awareness of intent, emotion, and consequence. Even in miniature, the effect is profound. Stones lift, water ripples in unnatural patterns, and creatures nearby respond with hesitation instead of instinctive aggression. As the morning progresses, Rimuru begins to notice something unexpected. Nen is not passive. It adapts to the wielder as much as the wielder adapts to it. The ambient currents in the forest subtly shift, almost as if testing the limits of his experimentation. Weak ripples of feedback reach him from distant hunters, sensing irregularities in aura that cannot be fully explained by conventional Nen analysis. Rimuru feels this as both a challenge and opportunity. He begins to manipulate these ripples intentionally, letting small variations in his aura propagate outward to observe responses, refining his understanding with each iteration. Nen, in essence, is teaching him the art of prediction, of understanding cause and effect at a level far deeper than mere power application. Rimuru's next focus is Gaio and In. honing his ability to detect hidden aura patterns with unparalleled precision. By concentrating on a distant patch of forest, he begins to sense the faint intentions of creatures that have remained unseen and unnoticed. The effect is immediate and instructive. He realizes that in Hunter x Hunter, information is as valuable as strength. Detecting intent before it manifests allows one to respond with timing and strategy that can neutralize threats without conflict. Rimuru experiments further, projecting subtle pulses of his own aura to gauge reactions and refine his sensory output. He is learning to read the environment as a living, responsive system where action, perception, and intent exist in constant interplay. As the day wears on, Rimuru pushes into even more advanced techniques, exploring manipulation in a way no conventional Nen user could. Rather than forcing control over others, he experiments with indirect influence, allowing aura to suggest possibilities rather than dictate outcomes. He watches as insects adjust their flight paths, small animals alter their movement, and ambient Nen currents fluctuate in ways that suggest observation rather than domination. This is a fundamental breakthrough. Rimuru understands that control in this universe does not require dominance. Influence can be exerted subtly, without aggression, using the environment and the responses of others as extensions of one's will. Even the hunters observing from a distance begin to notice irregularities. They detect a presence that shifts unpredictably yet purposefully, an aura that bends the rules they have spent their lives mastering. Some pause, reconsidering how to approach this anomaly. Others tighten their own Nen control, preparing for contingencies they cannot yet define. Rimuru's experiments are not simply about personal power. They are reshaping the way the world interacts with him, redefining the expectations of every Nen user who might encounter him in the future. By evening, Rimuru pauses on a ridge, surveying the subtle changes in the forest. Nen has begun to adapt to his presence, just as he has adapted to it. The invisible dialogue between intent, action, and consequence has reached a point where small pulses of aura now ripple predictably, yet remain dynamic, responding in real time to stimuli in a way that suggests cooperation between wielder and system. Rimuru understands that he is no longer merely a foreign element in this world. He is a participant, a variable that the system itself is beginning to integrate, and the lessons learned today mark only the first step in a journey that will challenge every preconceived rule of power in the Hunter x Hunter universe. Rimuru's experimentation with Nen evolves into something far beyond mere mimicry or adaptation. By now, he has begun to internalize the principles of Ten, Ren, Zetsu, and Hatsu in ways that even seasoned hunters might find unconventional. Where most users focus on honing a single facet of their aura, Rimuru treats it as a fluid, multidimensional system capable of reacting and adjusting in real time to any stimulus. He begins to sense not only the surface intentions of living beings, but also the residual imprints left in the environment, the faint echoes of previous actions, the subtle hesitation in creatures' aura patterns, the nearly imperceptible emotional residue left by passing Nen users. This ability to read layered intent allows him to navigate spaces without confrontation, yet with complete awareness of danger. Nen in this world, Rimuru realizes, is as much about perception and cognition as it is about power. Seeking to expand his mastery, Rimuru experiments with specialized conditions and vows, the same kind that conventional Nen users rely on to amplify their Hatsu abilities. Whereas most require rigorous mental conditioning and absolute focus to enforce a vow without risk of backfire, Rimuru approaches it differently. His adaptive physiology allows him to internalize these conditions instinctively, his aura shaping and reforming itself to satisfy the psychological prerequisites for amplification. The result is immediate and striking. When he projects an enhanced aura through a controlled vow, the surrounding Nen currents ripple outward, subtly shifting the flow of nearby wildlife and altering the perception of distant hunters. Rimuru is no longer merely learning Nen. He is bending its traditional expression to suit a form of intelligence it has never encountered. This leads him to experiment with manipulation and conjuration on a conceptual level rather than purely tactical. He attempts to project parts of his own essence into the environment, creating adaptive projections capable of responding to stimuli independently of direct control. Where a typical Nen user might conjure a sword, shield, or rigid construct, Rimuru conjures dynamic flowing extensions of himself, shapes and forms that move in response to surrounding intent and aura fluctuations. When these projections interact with the wildlife, the results are subtle but profound. Predators hesitate, prey moves more confidently, and ambient aura adjusts to accommodate the presence of a being unlike any the ecosystem has experienced. Rimuru is testing the boundaries of what Nen allows, and the system itself appears to adapt, responding in ways that suggest curiosity rather than hostility. As Rimuru pushes further, he experiments with Gyo and In to perceive deeper layers of intent. Focusing on distant creatures and residual hunter activity, he detects not only conscious thought but instinctive, subconscious patterns in behavior, allowing him to anticipate actions with uncanny accuracy. This is not merely prediction. It is interaction on a level that blends cognition with intuition. By synchronizing his aura subtly with these distant currents, he can influence responses indirectly, without aggression, without direct interference. Nen here, Rimuru realizes, is a dialogue, not a weapon. It reacts to curiosity, intelligence, and intent as much as it responds to force or desire. Hunters monitoring him from afar begin to notice anomalies they cannot categorize. The aura they detect shifts unpredictably yet purposefully, reacting to the environment and the observer simultaneously. Some hesitate, reconsidering their strategy. Others prepare for contingencies they cannot yet define. Even the forest seems subtly altered, adjusted to accommodate Rimuru's presence without breaking the natural order. The dynamic is unprecedented. Rimuru learns Nen, and Nen, in turn, adjusts to him. By nightfall, Rimuru sits atop a ridge, observing the patterns he has created. Ambient aura has stabilized in response to his presence, yet it remains flexible, ready to shift at a moment's notice. Nen is no longer simply a system to be learned, copied, or controlled. It is an active participant, responding to intelligence and intent, adapting to accommodate a being who has never followed its conventional rules. Rimuru feels a sense of cautious triumph, but he knows the journey is far from over. This universe, with its hunters, predators, and ever-present challenges, has begun to teach him lessons that go beyond raw power, demanding understanding, subtlety, and strategy. Rimuru has mastered the first steps of this dialogue, but the deeper, more dangerous lessons, the true potential of Nen in his hands, are still waiting. Just beyond the horizon, ready to test him in ways no other world ever has. Rimuru rises with the first light of dawn filtering through the trees, aware that the lessons learned so far are only the beginning. Nen, he realizes, is not static. Every interaction, every pulse of intent, every observation of the environment teaches both the user and the system something new. The hunters who have been tracking him may not yet fully understand what they are witnessing, but their presence has inadvertently contributed to his learning. Each ripple in their aura, each subtle decision, feeds into the feedback loop Rimuru has been cultivating. In effect, he has turned the world itself into a living classroom, and the challenges of Hunter x Hunter have become tools to accelerate his understanding. Now comes the true test. Rimuru begins experimenting with advanced Hatsu under conditions that simulate real combat without risking lethal confrontation. He creates extensions of his own body to interact with the terrain and nearby creatures in a controlled environment. These projections are not static. They adapt, shift, and react autonomously based on the currents of Nen surrounding them. Predators that approach are influenced subtly, their aggression redirected or neutralized without direct force. Even the distant hunters notice the anomalies, sensing that these manifestations are intelligent yet not directly aggressive, aware yet unobtrusive. The system begins to recognize Rimuru as something fundamentally different, a presence that cannot be categorized simply as threat or ally, monster or human. Rimuru's focus then shifts to manipulation with intent, layered on multiple levels. He experiments with influencing multiple targets simultaneously, testing whether his aura can subtly adjust actions without direct control. It is delicate work. Overreach could provoke hostile reactions, underreach could fail entirely. Each pulse is carefully modulated, each interaction calculated with precision. The results are astonishing. Nen, which traditionally responds to rigid intent or direct action, begins to accommodate complexity. Hunters in distant locations register minor disruptions in their observations of the world. Even the forest seems to hum in response to his presence, a subtle acknowledgement that the system recognizes an unprecedented variable. Nen is learning him as much as he is learning it, bending to his unique form of intelligence while remaining bound by its inherent rules. By midday, Rimuru tests the integration of multiple Nen types simultaneously, blending enhancement, emission, and manipulation into a single fluid expression. Where most users must specialize, he adapts them in concert, creating a dynamic aura capable of responding to unforeseen stimuli instantly. He discovers that this multidimensional approach allows for real-time adaptation to threats, environmental changes, and even the intentions of observers. Nen becomes less a tool for combat and more an extension of perception and will. Each ripple of aura, each subtle shift, communicates a level of intent that resonates across both living beings and the environment, influencing actions without coercion. Hunters observing from afar continue to speculate, sensing irregularities that defy conventional classification. Some are intrigued, considering the possibility of studying Rimuru rather than confronting him. Others are cautious, recognizing that this anomaly cannot be measured by traditional standards. Even the ecosystem itself begins to exhibit small signs of accommodation, with wildlife behaving in ways that suggest awareness of Rimuru's influence. The forest, the creatures, and the hunters are all participating in a dialogue orchestrated not through force, but through precise intent, observation, and adaptation. Rimuru has reached a point where learning Nen and teaching Nen have become inseparable processes, a continuous loop of cause, effect, and refinement. As night approaches once more, Rimuru reflects on the progress he has made. He understands now that mastery in this world is not about dominating the strongest opponent or defeating the deadliest threat. It is about perception, strategy, and harmonious interaction with the currents of intent that flow through the world. Nen has not only taught him discipline and focus, it has revealed the intricate psychology of power itself, how ambition, fear, and understanding shape the very fabric of existence. The forests, the predators, the hunters, all are elements of a living system that responds dynamically to both observation and action. Rimuru has stepped beyond the role of outsider, becoming an integrated participant capable of influencing, observing, and adapting within a universe governed as much by thought and intent as by strength. By the end of the segment, Rimuru sits atop the ridge, his aura subtly radiating in harmony with the environment around him. He has learned that Nen is not simply a means to gain power, but a language, a mirror, and a system capable of growth alongside its user. The hunters, creatures, and ambient forces have begun to recognize him as something unique, a variable that challenges established understanding. He has not only learned Nen, but in doing so has compelled Nen to learn him. The stage is set for the next phase of his journey. Encounters with the world's strongest practitioners, tests that will push the boundaries of this dialogue between intent, perception, and power, and a realization that the Hunter-x-Hunter universe may never view strength in the same way again. Rimuru's mastery is only beginning, and the true consequences of his presence have yet to ripple outward into the wider world. Rimuru's mastery of Nen and his subtle integration into the Hunter-x-Hunter world comes with a new, far more dangerous challenge. Reports of strange activity in the distant wilderness reach him through residual aura fluctuations, creatures unlike any he has seen, combining human intelligence with predatory instincts, displaying Nen in ways that are brutal, chaotic, and terrifying. The Chimera Ants are no longer just a distant threat. Their presence begins to ripple through the ecosystem, upsetting the balance Rimuru has been carefully observing. Where ordinary predators respond predictably to intent and aura, the Chimera Ants defy expectation. Each one carries intelligence, ambition, and aggression in equal measure. Rimuru senses immediately that these creatures will not simply retreat or hesitate in the presence of his influence. They will challenge it, test it, and possibly destroy it. The first encounter is with a scout, a humanoid Chimera Ant possessing a Nen ability that allows rapid adaptation in combat. Rimuru observes from a distance, analyzing every detail. The creature's aura is aggressive, yet disciplined in its own unique structure, a reflection of its hybrid biology and intelligence. Unlike ordinary threats, this scout reacts not only to physical presence, but to psychological cues, reading hesitation and confidence alike. Rimuru experiments carefully, projecting a controlled pulse of aura to test the limits of the creature's perception. The result is immediate and revealing. The scout flinches, hesitates, and adapts, but unlike ordinary wildlife, it recalibrates instantly, adjusting to counter what Rimuru projected. He recognizes the significance instantly. These are not creatures to be influenced casually. Each interaction is a battle of instinct, strategy, and raw adaptive intelligence. Rimuru's instincts tell him that a direct confrontation could be catastrophic. The Chimera Ants are relentless, capable of using both brute strength and Nen in innovative ways, and they learn quickly. Even minor tests could escalate into a fight that draws more of them from the surrounding regions. Using the lessons of patience and subtlety he has honed, Rimuru chooses a new strategy: observation combined with controlled influence. He begins to experiment with indirect interaction, using aura to manipulate the environment rather than confronting the ants directly. Branches fall strategically, shadows create confusion, and pulses of aura mislead the creature's perception. The scout reacts, but the effects are subtle enough that it cannot fully trace the source. Rimuru realizes this is the only way to manage threats of this intelligence: influence without confrontation, subtlety without weakness. As Rimuru continues observing, he notes the hierarchy forming within the Chimera Ant ranks. The ant's intelligence is not merely instinctual, it is organized. Captains and leaders coordinate, distributing tasks with precision, projecting their intent to subordinates. Their aura flows in patterns Rimuru has rarely seen outside human organization. Yet it is simultaneously alien, reflecting both predatory instinct and strategic intelligence. He begins mapping these interactions, learning to predict their behavior by reading patterns of aura and intent rather than relying on brute strength. The forest itself seems to respond differently to the ants than to him. Trees, animals, and residual aura shifts indicate fear, aggression, or adaptation in ways Rimuru has not encountered before. These creatures disrupt the ecosystem at a fundamental level, and every observation reveals how far-reaching their influence could be. Rimuru also detects faint traces of previous Nen usage among the Chimera Ants. Unlike hunters or ordinary predators, they utilize aura not only for defense and offense, but also for adaptation, observation, and communication. This makes them extraordinarily dangerous. A single miscalculation could lead to his influence being traced and countered. Rimuru experiments with projecting layered aura fields to obscure his presence, blending Ten, Zetsu, and Ren in new ways to create dynamic camouflage. This is the first time he realizes that in Hunter-x-Hunter, survival against intelligent threats is as much about psychological warfare as it is about raw power. The Chimera Ants force him to think not only as a strategist, but as a variable within a system that adapts as fast as he does. Despite the danger, Rimuru is fascinated. Each encounter with the ants provides insights into the limits and flexibility of Nen in combat scenarios. He notices that their learning is almost instantaneous. If they experience a specific technique or pattern, they adjust immediately, often in unpredictable ways. The implications are chilling. Conventional approaches to combat will fail against these creatures. Any reliance on predictable behavior or rigid tactics is futile. Rimuru must continue to adapt in real time, not merely for survival, but to understand how Nen interacts with beings capable of such rapid evolution. The ants are a mirror to the Hunter x Hunter world itself, relentless, adaptive, and willing to bend rules to survive. As the scout retreats and regrouping signals echo faintly through the forest, Rimuru realizes the scale of the problem. The Chimera Ants are more than isolated threats. They are an emerging force, capable of destabilizing entire regions. Their intelligence, combined with instinct and Nen proficiency, makes them unparalleled predators. Rimuru understands that direct engagement is not only dangerous, but potentially catastrophic. He must continue to study, observe, and interact subtly, using everything he has learned about Nen, intent, and environmental adaptation to prepare for encounters that could escalate beyond anything he has previously faced. The ants are teaching him lessons that no human or monster has ever taught, and the forest itself becomes a laboratory for mastering survival against a force that adapts faster than most can comprehend. Rimuru begins to formulate a plan. Direct confrontation with the Chimera Ants is a risk too great to take without preparation. Instead, he will use his growing mastery of Nen to manipulate the environment, anticipate movements, and control perception. Each encounter will be a test, each observation a data point, and every interaction an opportunity to refine his abilities. The ants' intelligence is formidable, but Rimuru's adaptability is unprecedented. This is the first time in this universe that a being can challenge them not by sheer force, but by redefining the rules of engagement entirely. The stage is set. Rimuru watches as the scout disappears into the shadows, aware that this is only the beginning. The Chimera Ant Problem is not just a threat. It is a catalyst. It forces Rimuru to refine everything he has learned about Nen, strategy, and environmental manipulation. He knows that sooner or later he will have to confront a greater force. And when that moment comes, it will test not just his abilities, but his understanding of the delicate balance between intent, perception, and power in a world ruled by Nen. The forest is alive with anticipation, and Rimuru feels the first true weight of responsibility that comes with being an unpredictable force in a universe capable of adapting to any threat. Rimuru continues to study the Chimera Ants from a safe distance, noting not only their physical capabilities, but the patterns in their interactions, both with each other and with the surrounding environment. Unlike ordinary predators, their intelligence allows them to analyze threats and adapt almost instantly, making them unpredictable even to seasoned hunters. Every action they take leaves a trace in the ambient Nen currents, a signature that Rimuru can read if he focuses carefully. He begins to map these signatures, learning to anticipate movements and reactions before they happen. The challenge is unlike anything he has encountered. Here, raw strength is insufficient. Success relies on observation, subtle manipulation, and the ability to remain invisible while influencing the battlefield in real time. The next scout he observes is significantly more advanced, a hybrid with Nen capabilities that rival many human hunters. Its aura is strong but chaotic, flowing in unpredictable bursts, a reflection of its adaptive instincts combined with limited strategy. Rimuru experiments, projecting small pulses of his own aura to gauge the creature's response. The ant does not flinch or hesitate. Instead, it recalibrates almost instantaneously, testing multiple possible outcomes simultaneously. This forces Rimuru to elevate his experimentation, blending Hatsu enhancement and manipulation in real time to maintain the upper hand, or at least avoid detection. Each interaction becomes a delicate negotiation of intent, a chess game played in the invisible currents of Nen. While observing, Rimuru notices a subtle but critical pattern. The Chimera Ants are beginning to recognize his presence, even if they cannot locate him directly. Their adaptations suggest they are learning not just from immediate encounters, but from environmental cues and residual aura traces. This realization is sobering. Unlike the forest creatures or human hunters, these beings can evolve tactics quickly, making them highly dangerous even without direct confrontation. Rimuru understands that he must operate not just reactively but proactively, anticipating not only physical threats but strategic adaptations that could undermine his subtle influence. Survival in this scenario requires a level of cognitive and adaptive flexibility that few beings in any universe can achieve. To test his limits, Rimuru begins experimenting with advanced projecting his awareness over a wide area to sense hidden currents of intent. He detects faint pulses from multiple Chimera Ants coordinating movements, a network of instinct and intelligence operating almost like a hive mind. This presents both a challenge and an opportunity. By influencing environmental cues and projecting subtle hints through aura, he can manipulate their coordination without direct engagement. Branches fall strategically, small obstacles shift, and shadows bend in ways that mislead the creature's perception. The ants respond, adjusting rapidly, but Rimuru notices that the pattern of overcompensation creates gaps in their strategy, gaps he can exploit to avoid detection and influence movement indirectly. Rimuru's next step is more daring. He attempts controlled interaction with one ant to test the limits of influence. Using a combination of manipulation and projection-based hatsu, he creates an aura mirror that subtly mimics and guides the scout's actions. The effect is immediate and complex. The creature moves differently than instinct dictates, pausing or redirecting in ways that preserve its awareness while remaining influenced. Rimuru observes, taking mental notes, analyzing how much he can guide without provoking a aggression. The experiment is successful, but it also confirms a harsh reality. The Chimera Ants are fast learners. Repeated use of the same technique will be noticed and countered. Adaptation and unpredictability must remain constant. As dusk approaches, Rimuru retreats to a higher vantage point to review his observations. The forest is quiet, but the energy is tense. Even without physical confrontation, the Chimera Ant's presence has reshaped the aura of the area. Hunters monitoring from afar may sense irregularities, while local wildlife responds to shifts in behavior patterns. Rimuru realizes that every interaction, every test, leaves ripples that extend beyond immediate observation. Influence in this world is subtle, systemic, and cumulative. To survive and thrive, he must continue to blend observation, manipulation, and adaptation, operating as both a participant and a variable within a system that evolves continuously. By nightfall, Rimuru's understanding of the Chimera Ant problem deepens. They are not merely predators, they are catalysts for a level of strategic and adaptive thinking that forces him to refine every aspect of his Nen, intent, and environmental interaction. Each scout, each small experiment adds to his comprehension, yet the looming threat of direct confrontation remains. The Chimera Ants are growing stronger, smarter, and more coordinated, and Rimuru knows that the moment of inevitable collision with their leaders is approaching. Until then, he must remain vigilant, subtle, and adaptive, using every insight gained to manipulate the battlefield before it manipulates him. The forest, the creatures, and the unseen hunters are all participants in a silent, intricate test of intelligence and power, and Rimuru is determined to emerge not only unscathed, but prepared for the even greater challenges that lie ahead. Rimuru's understanding of the Chimera Ant threat deepens with each passing day. The scouts he observes no longer act as isolated entities. They carry the intelligence of the hive with them, probing the environment, testing for weaknesses, and relaying information back through subtle Nen signals. Rimuru notes that these signals are not purely instinctual. They have structure, hierarchy, and even a primitive form of strategic foresight. Unlike normal predators, the ants can anticipate the effects of indirect manipulation, adjusting their behavior to compensate for environmental anomalies. This means that every subtle influence Rimuru applies, every pulse of aura intended to guide or mislead, is met with adaptive countermeasures. The forest itself seems to hold its breath, a stage on which intelligence, instinct, and intent clash, in ways both visible and invisible. To counter this, Rimuru begins experimenting with layered aura strategies, blending Hatsu, enhancement, and manipulation in ways even seasoned hunters might find unconventional. He projects multiple overlapping pulses of intent, each one designed to mimic different patterns of environmental influence, while simultaneously maintaining a base layer of aura that acts as a stabilizer. The result is that the Chimera Ants' adaptations are delayed, misdirected, or redirected entirely, allowing Rimuru to move and observe without being directly detected. This technique requires constant attention, near instantaneous analysis and adjustments, but Rimuru thrives on it. The more he refines his approach, the more the ants reveal about themselves, and the deeper his understanding of Nen's interaction with intelligence becomes. Despite his success, Rimuru realizes that this strategy has limits. The ants learn quickly, and repeated exposure to the same type of manipulation would eventually allow even the scouts to counteract it. He must continue to innovate, introducing subtle unpredictability into his aura patterns, reshaping both his projections and the environment dynamically. This is where Rimuru's unique physiology provides an advantage. His adaptive slime body allows him to adjust instantaneously, creating fluctuations in aura and intent that a typical Nen user could not replicate. The ants are formidable, but Rimuru is capable of evolution on a scale they cannot anticipate, at least not immediately. The next critical observation comes when a small group of Chimera Ants, led by a particularly intelligent mid-level commander, enters the area Rimuru has been monitoring. Their aura is more complex than that of the scouts, combining multiple Nen types in a hybridized experimental manner. Rimuru studies them carefully, noting how the commander coordinates its subordinates, subtly reinforcing their attacks and defenses through unseen aura linkages. He realizes that this is not simply instinct amplified. It is an organized strategy applied with the fluid adaptability of the hive. If left unchecked, these creatures could challenge even the most experienced hunters, and their presence could destabilize entire regions. Rimuru begins developing contingency plans, not to attack, but to manipulate the battlefield preemptively, creating patterns and flows of energy that could channel their movements into predictable paths without provoking direct conflict. Rimuru's experiments with the ants extend to testing his limits of perception and indirect influence. He projects subtle aura signatures that mimic movement and intent, watching how the ants respond to phantom stimuli. Some ants hesitate, others adjust, and the commander reacts almost imperceptibly, testing for hidden sources. These encounters teach Rimuru that indirect influence in Hunter x Hunter is as much psychological as it is physical. Success relies on nuanced understanding of intent, prediction of adaptive behavior, and the creation of environmental feedback that guides opponents without direct confrontation. Nen in this scenario are a language, a tool, and a system that must be treated as dynamic and living. By nightfall, Rimuru has mapped a significant portion of the ants' behavioral patterns, noting weaknesses, tendencies, and the potential for redirection. Yet he knows this is only the beginning. The Chimera Ants are growing in intelligence and coordination, and their leaders are likely to appear soon, carrying capabilities that will test not only his Nen proficiency, but his strategic ingenuity and adaptability. Rimuru reflects on everything he has learned. Survival against these creatures will not come from overwhelming power, but from perception, manipulation, and the continuous evolution of intent. The forest around him, alive with Nen currents and subtle shifts, becomes both his laboratory and his shield. He understands that the ants are teaching him lessons that no other entity could, a harsh, evolving education in the interplay between power, intelligence, and adaptation in the Hunter x Hunter universe. As Rimuru settles into the night, he feels the faint rhythmic pulse of the Chimera Ants moving through the distant forests, aware that these are not mindless predators but a force that will adapt, learn, and challenge him at every turn. The situation is precarious, but it is also exhilarating. This is the ultimate test of everything he has learned about Nen, about perception, and about influence. The ants are unpredictable, but so is he. With patience, strategy, and constant adaptation, Rimuru begins to formulate a plan not just to survive, but to shape the battlefield in ways that even the most intelligent and adaptive of the Chimera Ants cannot fully anticipate. The problem is immense, but so is the opportunity to push the boundaries of what a single being can accomplish within a world defined by Nen, intelligence, and unrelenting evolution. Rimuru watches the distant forest with a sharp focus, fully aware that the Chimera Ants are not just another threat. They are a force capable of reshaping the balance of the world around them. Their scouts, commanders, and mid-level leaders all carry a unique combination of instinct, intelligence, and Nen proficiency, making them extraordinarily difficult to predict or manipulate directly. Unlike ordinary creatures, they learn continuously, not just from immediate encounters, but from the subtle effects of the environment and residual aura fluctuations. Rimuru knows that any misstep could draw the attention of the higher-ranking ants, whose capabilities could easily overwhelm even his advanced Nen adaptations. This understanding shapes his strategy. Subtlety, observation, and indirect influence are paramount. He begins by creating complex patterns of aura projection that ripple outward across the terrain. These pulses mimic movement, intent, and even potential threats, designed to confuse and redirect the scouts and mid-level commanders without revealing his true position. The ants react instinctively, shifting their formation and adjusting their path to compensate for perceived dangers that do not exist. Rimuru studies their reactions meticulously, noting which cues are most effective and which are ignored or adapted to. Each adjustment allows him to refine his control, extending his influence over the battlefield without resorting to direct combat. The lesson is clear. In Hunter x Hunter, power alone is insufficient. Control comes from understanding, anticipating, and subtly guiding the flow of action before it can manifest. Rimuru also experiments with his Hatsu and manipulation abilities to influence individual ant behavior on a micro level. By subtly mimicking aura patterns associated with natural predators or territorial signals, he is able to instill hesitation, misdirection, or temporary distraction. The results are fascinating. Even ants with enhanced intelligence are occasionally influenced, their adaptive responses creating openings that Rimuru can exploit to guide the group's overall movement. The forest itself becomes part of his strategy, with ambient energy, fallen branches, and subtle shifts in terrain all utilized to extend his reach. Rimuru realizes that this is a unique form of battlefield control, indirect, adaptive, and continuous, relying on a dynamic feedback loop between intent, aura, and perception. The true challenge emerges when the higher-ranking Chimera Ants, including a commander-level hybrid, appear on the scene. Their aura is massive, disciplined, and multifaceted, combining brute force, adaptive learning, and strategic foresight. Rimuru senses immediately that any direct confrontation would be catastrophic. Even his advanced Nen abilities, which have allowed him to manipulate and influence lesser ants, might not be sufficient against such an intelligent and adaptable opponent. Instead, he shifts to a long-term strategy, using the lessons he has learned about environmental manipulation, layered aura projection, and predictive influence to control the battlefield indirectly. Every step, every subtle pulse, every variation in his aura is calibrated to shape the ant's behavior while maintaining his invisibility and safety. As he observes, Rimuru notices a critical insight. The Chimera Ant's adaptation relies not just on observation, but on consistency. If their expectations are continuously challenged and contradicted, their decision-making slows and becomes less reliable. Rimuru begins introducing controlled unpredictability into his projections, ensuring that the ants cannot form a stable model of his presence. This keeps them off balance while allowing him to study patterns in their responses. Even commanders are forced to make micro-adjustments, their adaptive intelligence taxed by stimuli that do not conform to conventional logic. The forest becomes a complex web of interactions, a living simulation in which Rimuru tests the limits of both his abilities and the ants' adaptive behavior. Throughout this process, Rimuru reflects on the broader implications. The Chimera Ants are more than a threat. They are a living demonstration of the principles of Nen, intelligence, and adaptation pushed to their extremes. They show him that even the most advanced combat skills are insufficient without perception, strategy, and the ability to manipulate intent indirectly. Every observation, every experiment, and every subtle adjustment enhances Rimuru's understanding of both the world and himself. By engaging with the ants in this indirect, strategic manner, he not only ensures his survival but begins to influence the trajectory of the entire ecosystem, reshaping the balance of power in subtle yet profound ways. As night falls over the forest, Rimuru feels the pulse of the Chimera Ant's intelligence in the distance, a constant reminder of the evolving threat. He sits calmly, radiating a controlled aura that both conceals and influences, fully aware that the ants are adapting even as he manipulates their perception. This is not just survival. It is a sophisticated battle of wits, intent, and adaptation, a game in which both sides learn and evolve continuously. Rimuru has mastered the first stages of this encounter, but he knows that the true test is still ahead, confronting the leaders, navigating the hive's intelligence, and shaping outcomes in a universe where every action, reaction, and perception carries weight. The Chimera Ant Problem has become a proving ground, forcing Rimuru to integrate everything he has learned about Nen, strategy, and influence into a coherent system capable of responding to the most intelligent and adaptive threats he has ever faced. Now, imagine this. Rimuru, having navigated the treacherous currents of Nen, the relentless intelligence of hunters, and the terrifying adaptability of the Chimera Ants, begins to realize the scope of his influence. The Hunter-x-Hunter universe is not the same as it was before his arrival. Every interaction, every subtle manipulation, every pulse of aura has left its mark. Forests bend in response to his presence, wildlife responds to his intent, and even Nen itself begins to adapt to the unique form of intelligence and flexibility that Rimuru embodies. What started as a journey of learning has transformed into a journey of reshaping the world itself. The ripple effects of Rimuru's presence extend far beyond the immediate forest. Hunters who once pursued him cautiously now share tales of an anomaly that defies classification, a being who wields Nen in ways that challenge every conventional understanding of power and strategy. Scouts and junior hunters whisper of forests that respond to thought alone, of creatures behaving unpredictably yet purposefully, as though guided by an unseen hand. Even the Chimera Ants, with all their intelligence and adaptability, have begun to encounter patterns they cannot fully interpret, forced to adjust strategies to account for Rimuru's indirect influence. What he has done is subtle, yet profound. He has become an invisible architect of perception, a force that the very ecosystem, both human and non-human, must now reckon with. Rimuru's mastery of Nen has reached a point where the boundaries between action and influence blur. He can manipulate environmental cues, predator and prey behavior, and even residual aura traces to guide outcomes without ever engaging directly. Hunters in the field find their decisions influenced by imperceptible shifts, making the impossible predictable and the unpredictable manageable. This is not domination through force. It is a demonstration of strategy elevated to an almost metaphysical level. The lessons he has absorbed from observing the Chimera Ants, their hive intelligence, adaptability, and instinctive tactical awareness, have allowed him to anticipate responses redirect aggression, and shape the flow of events in ways that were previously unimaginable. In essence, Rimuru has become a conductor, orchestrating an intricate symphony of intent, perception, and consequence. The world itself begins to feel different, as if responding to the presence of a being that operates on a scale beyond traditional rules. Nen flows in subtle new patterns influenced by his adaptive aura. Predators hesitate, sensing unseen guidance. Wildlife moves with calculated caution. And even the ambient energy of forests and rivers seems to pulse in recognition of his presence. It is as if Rimuru has introduced a new variable into the universe, one that challenges static assumptions about power, hierarchy, and control. What once functioned purely on instinct, training, and experience is now being recalibrated, subtly yet irrevocably, to account for a being who does not simply participate in the world, but interacts with it on multiple layers simultaneously. In cities and towns where hunters operate, rumors spread quickly. Some dismiss them as exaggeration, but others, those who have felt the tremors of Rimuru's influence even at a distance, begin to question the very nature of Nen itself. Could it adapt beyond its established categories? Could intelligence and intent manifest in ways that traditional classifications cannot predict? Rimuru's presence forces this contemplation, not through confrontation or spectacle, but through quiet, pervasive influence. Every measured pulse of aura, every manipulation of environmental and psychological currents, creates consequences that ripple through both human and natural systems. The idea of power in Hunter x Hunter is being subtly redefined not by brute strength, but by intelligence, observation, and the strategic application of influence. Even the Chimera Ants, once thought to be apex predators in both intelligence and adaptive skill, are beginning to shift. Rimuru's indirect interventions, layered and unpredictable, forced them to question patterns they had relied on instinctively. Commands that once flowed seamlessly through their hive networks now encounter delays, hesitation, or minor miscalculations. Predators adapt, leaders reorient strategies, and yet none fully comprehend the force shaping these outcomes. The invisible hand guiding events is neither human nor monster, neither friend nor foe in the traditional sense, yet its impact is undeniable. Rimuru has introduced unpredictability, forcing both allies and enemies to contend with possibilities they cannot anticipate. Rimuru himself reflects on this new reality. The universe he once entered as an outsider, a curious observer, is now subtly, fundamentally different because of his actions. He has learned Nen, adapted to its rules, and even coaxed it into responding to a form of intelligence it was never designed to accommodate. He has studied, influenced, and survived encounters with hunters and chimera ants alike, and in doing so, he has changed the very definition of power in this world. The forest, the creatures, the humans, and even the currents of Nen are now all part of an interconnected system that acknowledges, reacts to, and anticipates his presence. As night falls over the Hunter x Hunter universe, Rimuru sits atop a ridge overlooking the sprawling forest. The wind carries the faint pulse of distant creatures, the subtle shifts of hunters in the field, and the lingering traces of his own aura. He has become a force that cannot be ignored, a presence whose influence transcends conventional power and strategy. The lessons learned from the Chimera Ants, from hunters, and from the world itself have forged a being capable of reshaping reality with intelligence, subtlety, and adaptability. The world he entered is no longer the same. It has been forever changed by the arrival of the slime who learned Nen, who adapted to its deepest rules, and who now walks a path between observation, influence, and creation, leaving a lasting imprint on a universe that will never view power in the same way again. Rimuru's influence continues to spread in ways both visible and imperceptible. His presence has created subtle shifts in how Nen flows throughout the regions he has traversed, even in areas far removed from direct interaction. Hunters report unexpected synchronicities in the field, sensing patterns they cannot explain. Some begin to speculate about an unseen strategist guiding events from the shadows, while others experience brief glimpses of anomalies, forest paths that seem to bend to convenience, animals acting with uncanny awareness, and predators behaving in ways that suggest hesitation or recognition of a force beyond their comprehension. Rimuru has become a living paradox, invisible yet undeniable, a being whose presence transforms the ecosystem simply by existing within it. The Chimera Ants, too, are adapting to this new variable, though not fully understanding it. The scouts Rimuru observed have begun to display behaviors that suggest uncertainty, pauses that were never there before, miscalculations that interrupt coordinated attacks, and hesitations in their adaptive processes. Even mid-level commanders, who once functioned with near-perfect efficiency, are forced to recalibrate strategies constantly. Rimuru realizes that he has not merely survived encounters with these creatures, he has introduced a level of unpredictability into their networked intelligence. The hive mind, once relentless and adaptive, now encounters phenomena that cannot be easily accounted for, creating openings for him to manipulate outcomes indirectly. It is not dominance through force, but dominance through understanding, foresight, and the subtle orchestration of perception and intent. Rimuru's approach to influence has grown increasingly sophisticated. He no longer relies solely on overt environmental manipulation. Instead, he experiments with layered psychological and Nen-based interventions. By projecting subtle, multi-tiered aura patterns, he can create scenarios that guide both animal and human behavior simultaneously. A fallen branch, a shifting shadow, the slight rustle of leaves, all are harnessed as tools to manipulate perception without detection. Hunters in the vicinity feel the effects but struggle to pinpoint the source, and even the Chimera Ants adjust their tactics in ways that betray frustration and uncertainty. Rimuru has become a master of indirect influence, demonstrating that the true power of Nen lies not just in strength, but in understanding how intent interacts with environment, intelligence, and instinct. The world Rimuru inhabits has changed fundamentally as a result. Regions that were once predictable now operate under a new, dynamic logic influenced by his presence. Wildlife moves with calculated caution, predators hesitate at critical moments, and even the ambient currents of Nen shift subtly in response to his aura. The lessons gleaned from the Chimera Ants, the need for adaptability, the importance of unpredictability, and the consequences of intelligence applied without foresight have informed a new paradigm of interaction. Rimuru is no longer simply a visitor in this world. He is a variable that the ecosystem, both human and non-human, must account for. His influence extends beyond immediate action, shaping behavior, perception, and strategy on a systemic level. Hunters who once sought to measure and classify power find themselves confronted with phenomena that defy categorization. They sense anomalies in the flow of aura, inconsistencies in behavior among creatures and humans, and disruptions in expected outcomes. Rimuru has created a new baseline for what it means to wield Nen: adaptability, indirect influence, and strategic orchestrations of both environment and intent. His approach demonstrates that power is not merely about overwhelming strength or technique, but about the ability to shape outcomes through intelligence, subtlety, and the careful application of insight. Even the Chimera Ants leaders, who are capable of terrifying displays of strength and strategy, must now contend with a factor that cannot be anticipated. Rimuru's indirect manipulations, layered and unpredictable, prevent them from establishing absolute control over their territory. The hive is forced into reactive behaviors, constantly adjusting, never fully confident. Rimuru understands that this is a long-term transformation, one in which the very nature of adaptation, strategy, and hierarchy in the world is being subtly rewritten. He is no longer just surviving, he is reshaping the rules by which all beings in the Hunter x Hunter universe operate. As night descends, Rimuru reflects on the profound impact of his journey. His mastery of Nen, combined with his understanding of observation, influence, and adaptive intelligence, has allowed him to leave an indelible mark on the world. The forests, the creatures, the hunters, and even the Chimera Ants now operate within a reality subtly altered by his presence. The Hunter x Hunter universe has been forever changed, not through confrontation alone, but through strategic, invisible, and pervasive influence. Rimuru has proven that true power lies not only in what one can do, but in how one can shape the perceptions, actions, and evolution of an entire ecosystem, creating consequences that ripple far beyond the immediate moment. Rimuru's presence continues to ripple outward, reshaping the Hunter x Hunter universe in ways that even the most experienced hunters cannot fully grasp. The subtle manipulations he has woven into the environment, combined with his adaptive mastery of Nen, have created a world in which perception and intent carry as much weight as raw strength. Hunters in the field notice patterns that do not conform to logic. They arrive at locations just in time to encounter unexpected shifts in creature behavior. Predatory animals hesitate when they would have attacked, and even minor aura fluctuations seem to anticipate potential threats before they fully manifest. Rimuru has become a silent architect, orchestrating outcomes through observation, influence, and the constant recalibration of environmental and psychological factors. The Chimera Ants, once regarded as apex predators in both intelligence and adaptive skill, now find themselves operating under new constraints they do not fully understand. Their hive networks experience delays, hesitation, and miscalculations that ripple upward through their ranks. Even commander-level hybrids capable of coordinating attacks with ruthless precision begin to display patterns of uncertainty when navigating terrain subtly manipulated by Rimuru. Each action they take, each recalibration, leaves traces in the ambient Nen currents, further feeding the feedback loop that Rimuru has established. He recognizes this as a profound insight. Intelligence, no matter how advanced, can be influenced when it interacts with an environment shaped by subtle, unpredictable variables. Rimuru's strategies evolve further. He experiments with layered aura constructs that operate autonomously, creating the illusion of multiple entities, each with intent and awareness. These constructs interact with the environment and its inhabitants, subtly influencing decision-making without direct confrontation. Hunters may sense an anomaly in timing or movement. Predators hesitate at critical junctures, and the Chimera Ants miscalculate responses to threats that are never physically present. This approach allows Rimuru to extend his influence across vast areas, effectively shaping behavior on a macro scale while remaining virtually undetectable. The forest itself becomes an extension of his consciousness, responding to his will with a fluidity that mirrors the intelligence he has cultivated within himself. Beyond the tactical advantages, Rimuru's impact begins to alter the psychological landscape of the world. Hunters, aware of anomalies they cannot explain, begin to question assumptions about power, strategy, and the nature of Nen itself. They encounter situations in which traditional approaches fail or produce unexpected results, forcing them to adapt and evolve. The Chimera Ants, too, are subjected to this subtle education. Their patterns of dominance, strategy, and aggression are disrupted in ways that compel reassessment and learning. Rimuru has introduced a form of influence that transcends force, teaching through presence, manipulation, and the careful orchestration of circumstance. This is not merely survival, it is systemic transformation. As Rimuru observes from a distance, he notices the cascading effects of his interventions. Even minor shifts in environmental aura have begun to affect neighboring regions. Creatures adapt to patterns previously unseen, hunters alter patrol routes based on subtle cues, and human settlements experience changes in wildlife behavior that appear almost preternatural. These changes are not overtly destructive, they are calibrations, adjustments that ripple through ecosystems and social structures alike. The world, once static in its predictable flows, now dances to a rhythm subtly dictated by Rimuru's adaptive intelligence and unparalleled control of Nen. Rimuru reflects on the broader implications of his actions. His mastery of Nen, combined with his ability to manipulate both environment and perception, has created a reality in which intelligence, strategy, and adaptability are now intertwined in unprecedented ways. The Chimera Ants, once a near insurmountable threat, now contend with variables they cannot fully anticipate, while hunters are forced to reconsider the very nature of power. Even the flow of Nen itself appears subtly altered, responding to a being whose intelligence defies conventional categorization. Rimuru realizes that he has done more than survive in this universe. He has fundamentally changed the rules by which beings interact, fight, and adapt. By nightfall, the forest pulses with the quiet hum of Nen, layered with the subtle effects of Rimuru's influence. Predators hesitate, prey navigates the environment with new awareness, and distant hunters feel the impact of unseen forces guiding events in unexpected ways. Even the Chimera Ants operate under constraints born not of confrontation, but of perception, pattern, and adaptability. Rimuru sits atop a ridge, observing the delicate interplay of forces he has set in motion. He understands that the world is no longer the same as when he first arrived. His presence has woven a web of influence that stretches across ecosystems, human settlements, and the complex networks of Nen users. In this transformed world, power is no longer simply measured by strength or technique. Influence, perception, and adaptability now define the boundaries of possibility. Rimuru has become the catalyst for this shift, a variable that challenges the assumptions of every creature, human and Nen user in the universe. The hunter-x-hunter world has been forever altered, not through conquest or brute force, but through strategy, subtlety, and the intelligent application of influence. Rimuru's journey is far from over, but his legacy has already begun. A world forever changed, aware that a new standard of power exists, one that blends intelligence, adaptation, and the careful orchestration of intent into a force that cannot be ignored. Rimuru feels the weight and significance of the change he has brought to the hunter-x-hunter universe. Every creature, from the smallest forest animal to the Chimera Ants that once ruled with near impervious intelligence, now operates in a reality subtly altered by his presence. Even human hunters, trained for years to read intent, manipulate aura, and anticipate threats, experience phenomena that challenge their understanding of Nen and strategy. These changes are not immediately visible or dramatic. They are nuanced, pervasive, and persistent. Predators hesitate where they once attacked, wildlife moves with awareness that borders on intuition, and forests themselves seem to pulse with a new rhythm, a rhythm attuned to Rimuru's subtle orchestration. The Chimera Ants, once the apex of adaptation and intelligence in this ecosystem, continue to face disruptions they cannot fully comprehend. Commanders adjust strategies in response to unforeseen variables, scouts hesitate, and even the hive's leaders begin to sense a presence that defies categorization. Rimuru's indirect manipulations, layered and unpredictable, create an ongoing dialogue between him and the ants, an interaction that transcends traditional combat. They learn, adapt, and recalibrate, but always one step behind a being who has redefined the rules of engagement. His presence alone forces them into a state of constant reassessment, proving that influence, subtlety, and perception can rival raw strength in shaping outcomes. Meanwhile, hunters observing these anomalies are compelled to reconsider the very foundations of their training. Traditional metrics of power, strength, speed, technique, seem insufficient to explain the phenomena they encounter. Instead, Rimuru demonstrates that true mastery lies in observation, adaptation, and the ability to influence outcomes without direct confrontation. This revelation begins to ripple through the Hunter Association itself, inspiring new lines of inquiry into the nature of Nen, intelligence, and strategy. A new paradigm emerges, one in which understanding and subtlety can rival and sometimes surpass overt displays of power. Rimuru has not merely learned the hunter-x-hunter world, he has become a transformative force within it. The impact of Rimuru's presence extends even to the environment itself. Forests and rivers subtly respond to his aura, wildlife adjusts patterns instinctively, and even atmospheric currents carry traces of his influence. Every interaction, every experiment, every subtle shift of aura contributes to a new equilibrium, one in which intelligence, perception, and adaptability hold as much sway as raw physical ability. The ecosystem becomes a reflection of his influence, demonstrating a harmony between observation, manipulation, and survival. In this way, Rimuru embodies a new type of power, one that transforms not just the user, but the world around them in profound and lasting ways. As Rimuru surveys the landscape, he understands that his journey is far from complete. The Chimera Ants remain a looming threat, still evolving, still learning, but now constrained by forces they cannot fully predict. Hunters continue to explore and adapt, influenced by phenomena they cannot yet explain. The forest itself has become a living laboratory for the interaction between intelligence, intent, and environmental adaptation. Rimuru's presence has set into motion a cascade of change that will continue long after any single encounter, altering the way beings in this universe perceive power, strategy, and survival. Ultimately, Rimuru's arrival has left the hunter-x-hunter universe forever changed. Power is no longer solely measured by strength, speed, or skill. It is also defined by adaptability, perception, and the subtle orchestration of influence. By learning Nen, manipulating the environment, and interacting with both hunters and Chimera Ants, Rimuru has reshaped the rules that govern this world. His presence is a catalyst, demonstrating that intelligence and strategy can rival and even surpass brute force. The ecosystem, the hunters, and even the Chimera Ants are all participants in a dynamic system now influenced by a single being of unprecedented adaptability and insight. Rimuru rises from his vantage point as dawn begins to break, the forest bathed in golden light. He knows that challenges remain, that encounters with the world's strongest forces are inevitable, and that the lessons of this universe are far from complete. But one truth is undeniable. The hunter-x-hunter world is no longer the same as it was before his arrival. A single slime has not only learned the rules of Nen, but has demonstrated that power, influence, and intelligence are intertwined in ways this universe had never witnessed. The world has been forever changed, and Rimuru's journey, though ongoing, has already left an indelible mark on everything around him. And with that, Rimuru looks toward the horizon, ready for whatever this transformed world has in store, a being whose presence has forever altered the balance of power and perception in the hunter-x-hunter universe. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed exploring this what-if scenario, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all our multiverse adventures. Drop a comment telling us which universe you'd like to see Rimuru explore next. Your idea might just be our next video.